Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Mel from MelDidItHerself, and I'm a social service worker turned furniture refinisher, DIYer, small business owner, and content creator. I've learned everything I know about these industries thanks to people who shared their knowledge on the internet. So I'm paying it forward by bringing you my tips, lessons learned, and sharing my journey in this space with you. So thank you so much for being here, being curious, and being a lifelong learner like me. Let's hop into it. What is up, my friends and fellow Busybees? Today, we are asking the age-old question for our painted and refinished furniture pieces. To price drop or not to price drop? That is the question. I did an episode, which was episode number 12, Pricing Your Painted and Refinished Furniture, where I went through how I figure out what to charge when pricing my pieces for sale, and all the things that I take into account when doing so. So if you haven't listened, I will link that in the show notes and then come back to this episode because I want to go over all of the strategies for figuring out what to do when a piece has been sitting for quite a while after being listed and different approaches that you can take. I want to put a disclaimer here that these are just my personal approaches and there's many ways to skin a cat, so if you do something different, that's totally fine. As long as it's working for you and your business or your sales, then go hard, and I am always open to hearing others' approaches as well. So feel free to send me an email, which is always in the show notes of each episode, or send me a DM on Instagram at MelDidItHerself, and I would love to chat. So I always like to go into a listing having a timeline in my head of my expectations and have that determined before even posting. This just helps me to stick to my initial plan and not have any emotions guiding my decisions. If a piece I thought was going to sell really quickly and I was really excited about ends up sitting with not a lot of action for quite a while, and I start to get a little salty about it, because it happens. Ultimately though, depending on how long it has been sitting, how big the piece is, and how many pieces I have sitting in my house, and thus don't have a ton of extra room for it to sit and take up space, I will sometimes lower the price a bit on my piece. But there are a lot of other things that I'll do first, or other approaches that I'll try out, so let's talk about those. I really don't like to let pieces sit stagnant for too long. This is why I recommend having a timeline in your head for how long you'll have it up, listed, and unsold before either you relist the item or make any other changes to it or the listing. I really like using Facebook Marketplace to list my items if they don't already sell off of my Instagram when I'm showing pieces that I'm working on and people DM me to claim it. I like the Marketplace platform because it has a built-in feature where it automatically notifies you after an item has been listed for 2 weeks and it asks you if you want to relist it. And then after you renew it multiple times, I think maybe 6 times, it will offer the option to delete and relist without having to go in and manually do it. I used to also list my items on Kijiji, which is a similar platform that we have here in Canada, and you have to go in and do all of that stuff manually, or you did at the time, and it ended up costing me more time than it was worth, so I just stopped listing items there because they weren't really selling there as much anyways. So if an item isn't selling, there could be a few reasons for that, and I like to do a bit of a deep dive to try and determine which reason it might be for that certain piece. Sometimes it really depends on luck for things to sell. It could be well priced, beautiful, would go perfectly in some spaces, but if the person or the people who have those spaces aren't looking at the listings at that point in time or aren't at the point where they want to redo their space, then it just might not sell right away, despite everything else being the perfect storm. I've had multiple pieces sit for honestly well over a year or even more, and then when the right person comes along, they are so excited to get the piece and are so happy with it. So let that be a reminder the next time that you're trying to speed a sale along. So when we want to do a deep dive, first things first is to go into the ad to make sure that you've completed all the key pieces in the listing. So make sure you didn't forget to add the relevant tags or keywords to the ad, that you have a good descriptive title, have all of the information needed in the description itself, and that it's listed under the proper category. In theory, it should all be there, but sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes if you're rushing the listing process, it's easy to accidentally click the wrong thing, and that could result in it not showing up in the places where people would be searching for the thing that you have listed. And before we go on, I wanted to throw a quick reminder out that I have released my free guide and checklist to starting your own furniture painting and refinishing business. If you're someone who has thought about making over furniture for profit and have wanted to take that step but just had no idea where to start, you're going to want to grab this to get you on the right path. A lot of times people can start to do these kinds of furniture flips and then find themselves falling into selling them casually and then wanting to go more official with it as a business as well. So if that's you, you'll also really want to get your hands on this to make sure that you don't miss anything when setting things up. So head to the episode page on the platform that you're listening on, and I'll have that guide and checklist linked so that you can grab it today to start you off on the right foot on your own furniture refinishing ride. So another good indicator of how the ad is performing is to look at the insights of the listing, which should be available regardless of what platform you use. On Facebook Marketplace, it shows how many views, saves, and shares that the listing has gotten, and it helps give an idea of what's happening and help you decide which route to take. For instance, it'll tell you, are people even clicking into it? How many messages have you gotten about it relative to the amount of views? Has anyone saved the ad? How many saves do you have relative to the amount of views or messages? If there are a ton of views, a ton of saves, but you haven't gotten many messages or inquiries about the piece, it could potentially mean that it's on people's radar, but they aren't willing to take the plunge at that listed price. If there hasn't been a ton of views on the listing, your approach could be to just try and get some more visibility on it before you look at lowering the price. One way to do that is by relisting the piece so that it goes to the top of the category, and relisting it at strategic times when you assume or know that people will likely be looking at the platform or for those kinds of items. And that might require some trial and error to figure out just by testing days of the week and times of the day. Typically, I think Fridays or Saturday morning are a good time to do it because, people are getting up on Saturday morning and taking things slow and doing some shopping while sipping their morning coffee or whatever. Who knows what the reason is? That's just the story I make up in my mind. Or maybe that's what I do. Who knows? Also, certain times of the year may just be more or less busy in terms of people searching to buy furniture in general. I have found that in the new year is when people are typically looking to buy more, likely with the changeover of the new year and having sat around in their homes more over the holidays and deciding what new things that they want or want to switch out. Summer has also historically been a little bit slower for me, specifically August. So I'm assuming people are usually off on holidays and vacation while the kids are out of school for the last couple of weeks. So they're A, spending less time at home, and also B, spending more of their disposable income on those kinds of things. And sometimes a good way to get visibility is, in fact, to lower the price because it then goes into the lowered price category. And you can just take a very small marginal amount off. It doesn't have to be like a huge slash of the prices. However, also consider the fact that the price could not be a factor at all in why it has not yet sold, and fixing the actual thing first could mean that you get just as much money as you had initially intended to get for it. What I mean by this is if the piece wasn't getting seen by people because it wasn't tagged with the right keywords, or maybe the photo had poor staging or lighting or whatever, the right people may just not be seeing the listing and the price could have not ever been a factor at all. Also, some people may inherently assume that a piece that is inexpensive is indicative of a lack of finesse or quality too. So just chopping your prices might work against you. And it's definitely working against the community of refinishers as a whole if you're drastically undercutting the general prices that are in your area and devaluing the art and the service as a whole. Also, a heads up worth noting is that if you do change the price of an existing listing on Facebook Marketplace specifically, it does show that on the public side of the listing, whether you lower or raise the price. So if for whatever reason you don't want that to show, you would need to delete and relist the piece manually by creating a whole new listing and going through that process again. Okay, so we've talked about two options to do when a piece isn't selling: adapt or change the listing itself, or lowering the price, whether it be marginally or substantially. Another option worth considering, like I just mentioned, is if you need to take new photos of the piece, or maybe even just rearrange the photos of the piece so that there's a different one that is the first featured photo to grab the attention of the potential buyer and reel them in. This can sometimes be hard to be objective about because our egos can get in the way, but really just try to take a step back and put yourself in the buyer's shoes and ask, is this a good depiction of the piece? Is this photo well lit? Did the items I staged it with work well with the piece and accentuate it rather than distract from it? Is the photo too far away or too close up so you can't see enough of what it is? If there's substantial room for improvement, or maybe you just get a stroke of creativity and inspiration and think of a better way to stage the piece, then a great approach is to reshoot and restage the piece and try that out. The last thing you can do if a piece just doesn't seem to sell is to redo the piece. It's unideal because of the sunken cost already in terms of time and product and thus money spent to refinish it initially. But if you think that it could make the difference or you just don't have the space for it to sit any longer, this could definitely be an option. Particularly if it's a super distinct piece with bright colors or patterns or whatever that would highly limit the piece from fitting into most spaces. Changing it up and doing something a little bit more neutral or one that could fit into more spaces or is less of a specific style or look that would fit more decor style types could help. Whether we like it or not, neutrals like white and gray and black do tend to be the ones that often sell because they can just work in most spaces and don't draw too much attention as compared to something like a hot pink. So that's always an option as well. And something you may not know about me, I love little motivational messages. They literally always get me fired up, and I keep a running list of ones that are especially catchy or speak to me in the Notes app on my phone. So I'm going to end every podcast episode with one of those that I've noted down over the years in hopes that you leave our time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever comes your way this week. So this week's Mel's motivational message is, nothing happens if nothing happens. And this one's a little bit ironic because sometimes, even if you have a piece sitting for a really long time and you do nothing other than relist the piece a few times, it will then inevitably sell. I just actually had a dresser that I had listed well over a year ago. I knew that I didn't actually want to lower the price because I'd actually replaced the hardware, and it was a piece that I was keeping some natural wood on the drawers, and the holes were like super specific. I forget, it was like 2¼ inches or something. They were very small, but I didn't have the initial hardware that was on it because they didn't have it when I picked it up. Anyways, so I had spent quite a bit on the hardware and I didn't have a lot of profit after all the time that I spent on the piece. So I didn't want to lower the price anymore, but it had been sitting down in my storage room for probably closer to a year and a half. And it was a very specific color. It was pink with some whitewashed white, but it was really nicely done in my opinion with gold handles and pink handles. And I thought that it looked great. And I really envisioned it in a nursery, which kind of limits it. I know when you're using colors, if it's pink, most people won't be using that in a little boy's room most of the time. And because it was so pink, a lot of people wouldn't use that in their living room, for example. So it had been sitting, and every now and then I would post a reminder of things that are available on my Instagram and things like that. And all of a sudden, one of my followers on Instagram sent me a message because I have a highlight on there of all of the items that I have currently available. And she asked for details on it. So I sent her the marketplace listing and she ended up buying it, and she's putting it in a nursery. She just picked it up a few days ago. And once she gets things settled, she's going to send me photos of it in the space. I'm so excited to see it. And it was such a reminder and a good validation that sometimes it really does just take that perfect buyer to come along, regardless of when it happens, for that piece to end up where it's meant to be. I know it's a little bit woo-woo, but I do think that some pieces that you do just have certain spaces that they're meant to be in. It also happened with a side table that I had done previously, and it was in a mustard yellow, and it was one that I was like, you know what, maybe I won't even sell it. It had been listed forever. I was using it for storage in a closet, and then somebody randomly messaged me, and I hadn't been relisting it, I don't even think at all. Like, it was probably deep down. She had searched for that specific thing. She bought it. She sent me a photo of it in her space, and it was literally the space that I had envisioned that type of a piece going in, with a bunch of mid-century accents and all these things. So it's just funny how that all happens. So all that to say, typically nothing happens if nothing happens, but also sometimes something happens if nothing happens. if we're looking at your business as a whole, at the pieces that you are working on or thinking that you're working on, but you're really not working on them that hard, nothing happens if nothing happens. So all it takes is that initial action, that first step on whatever it is, whatever that thing is that you're putting off, because you want to make sure that you're so prepared and that you know everything about the thing before you get started. Just get started, because nothing happens if nothing happens. There is literally 100% chance that you will not accomplish that thing and you will not do a good job at that thing if you don't start that thing and just try. So remember that nothing happens if nothing happens, and that goes in your real life and life more generally as well. If it's a matter of cleaning the house or doing the laundry or asking out that person that you've been eyeing or whatever it might be, nothing happens if nothing happens. And again, a lot of these motivational messages are so painfully plain. Some people may be ripping their hairs off being like, fucking duh. And fair enough. But I think they're good reminders, because nothing happens if nothing happens. It's plain, it's to the point, but it kind of gets you wanting to get up and get going, no? For me at least. And another exciting thing that I wanted to let my loyal busy bees in on is that I am in the process of planning out a weekly newsletter for those of you who love furniture makeovers, which if you're here, I'm assuming that you do, and for people who are always looking for inspiration. It's called the Friday Furniture Focus, and as the name states, will be sent out every Friday with a weekly Q&A featuring some furniture refinishing friends that I've come across on the internet, some beautiful artists, some furniture refinishing tips and tricks, furniture pieces that I've come across on Instagram that are totally inspiring me that week, and lots more. So if you're interested in receiving it, I'll leave a link to my website and you can just scroll down and sign up at the bottom of the page, and keep an eye out on your inbox for weekly education, inspiration, and motivation, because I am just getting started on this furniture refinishing ride, and there's lots more where that came from. All right, that's it for now. I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you guys next week.